Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I am Brooke Clement. I'm the director here at the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Library and Museum, which is part of the National Archives and Records Administration. It is my pleasure to welcome you tonight. I always say this, but I continue to fervently believe this. I want to thank you for your commitment to this library and museum, and thanks to the Gerald R. Ford Foundation for its continued support and for putting together this terrific program. Before we begin, can you please be sure your cell phones are turned off or placed on silent? And while you do that, I want to be sure to make you aware of an upcoming program. Documentarian Naja Pham Lockwood will be here on May 22nd to screen her latest short film on Healing Land's Bird's Perch. This is the first documentary from a Vietnamese-born filmmaker that explores the continuing aftershocks of the Vietnam War from the perspectives of both sides of the war, built around the Pulitzer Prize-winning photo by Eddie Adams. And I have a special announcement that we are planning on reviving the Ford After 5 programming this summer, so please stay tuned for those. To learn more about all of our upcoming programs and events, please visit our website at fordlibrarymuseum.gov. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Paulette, Director of the Ford Leadership Forum, to kick things off for us.
Thank you, Brooke, and thank you to our partners at the National Archives for hosting this event and for this great partnership that we have. I'll be doing some more thank yous at the end of the program tonight, but right now I want to set a little bit of context for tonight's activities. By signing the Paris Peace Accords, the U.S. officially ended its military involvement in Vietnam. While the U.S. dream of defeating communism was ending, South Vietnam's nightmare was continuing. Refusing to abide by the terms of the peace agreement, the North Vietnamese began a systematic attack on South Vietnam. Requests for military aid were refused by a House of Representatives that no longer had any taste for war and wanted to avoid getting sucked back into the quagmire. Desperation soon descended upon the South Vietnamese people. The suffering that occurred in the wake of the withdrawal of American troops was catastrophic. The North Vietnamese attacks sparked a massive humanitarian crisis as the communists sent people to re-education camps, summarily executed and or tortured hundreds of thousands of South Vietnamese people, and instituted an economic plan that resulted in disastrous levels of unemployment, inflation, and mass starvation. Many South Vietnamese reasonably responded to the threats by attempting to leave their homeland. Ford's January request to Congress for military and economic support never made it out of committee. In an April 3rd press conference in 1975, Ford, citing the great human tragedy befalling South Vietnam and reiterating America's moral obligations to its ally, sought funding to begin what came to be known as Operation Babylift. On April 5th, he flew to San Francisco to greet the second plane load of orphans coming to America. On the 10th of April, 1975, President Ford addressed Congress and scolded them for not keeping the nation's promise to the South Vietnamese. We were failing in our pledge, he argued, to help them protect themselves by providing them with the military, economic, and moral support they needed. Ford, seeking a middle path between re-engagement and doing nothing, begged Congress to provide military and economic assistance. Fundamental decency, he said, requires that we do everything in our power to ease the misery and the pain of the monumental human crisis which has befallen the people of Vietnam. Millions have fled in the face of the communist onslaught and are now homeless and destitute. I hereby pledge in the name of the American people that the United States will make a maximum humanitarian effort to help care for and feed these hopeless victims. End of quote. Vietnamese refugees found the American public less than welcoming. In a demonstrative press conference held 1 week after the fall of Saigon, a very upset President Ford admonished the American people to uphold, quote, the long tradition of opening our doors to immigrants of all countries. He assured the nation that, like refugees of the past, the Vietnamese would prove to be good citizens. Claiming that Americans were more motivated by, quote, fear and misunderstanding rather than charity and compassion, Ford called on his countrymen with these words: "These refugees chose freedom. They do not ask that we be their keepers, but only for a time to be their helpers." Moved by Ford's words, Congress quickly passed the Indochina Migration and Refugee Assistance Act that appropriated over $400 million to help refugees. Tonight, we remember those who fled their native land, not only those who made their way to American shores, but the tens of thousands lost at sea and the hundreds of thousands who suffered as political victims. We also want tonight to recognize that President Ford was indeed right. These refugees became good citizens who contributed greatly to the American project. For the Vietnamese community, we trust that their sorrow and sense of loss may be mitigated somewhat by a recognition that where America failed them, it also, even if only fitfully, welcomed them. I will now introduce President Ford's son, Stephen. Many of you may recognize Steve from his acting career, but if not, you may recall the beautiful eulogy he recently gave at President Carter's funeral. Steve has been active in helping Americans remember our role in Vietnam and the war's aftermath, and celebrating the achievements of the Vietnamese refugees, and in maintaining his parents' legacy of service. Please welcome Greg Ford's youngest cousin to the stage.
Greg Ford. That was a setup there I was not aware of. Well, actually, Jeff, thank you. I'm going to be up here for just a second, and then I'll come back. We're going to first show you a film, 13-minute documentary, and it's going to talk about and tell the story of Operation Babylift. And this was something my father had great passion for and empathy for these children. And I think you'll find this film very moving. We partnered with the Pan Am Foundation to get this film produced and made, and we're going to use it in every venue we have to help educate particularly young people, middle school, high school, college kids, about history, both the good and bad of it. So please enjoy the film.
April 1975, the last month of the Vietnam War. 18 North Vietnamese divisions had surrounded Saigon, and civilians desperately tried to flee from the clutches of the communist victors. The Ford administration announces Operation Babylift, a humanitarian effort to rescue Vietnamese orphans.
These 2,000 Vietnamese orphans are all in the process of being adopted by American families. This is the least we can do, and we will do much, much more.
When you're president of the United States, you take the good and the bad. My father knew he did the right thing, trying to go to Congress, trying to get money to help South Vietnam. We had been there for so many years, and it was important for us to support those people that had supported us. You had so many children that had been fathered by American servicemen, and we couldn't leave those kids there. It is love, not blood, that raises kids. I think what affected my dad's heart so much is when he was a baby, he was born into a family where he had a physically violent biological father, and thank God he had a great mother who fled that marriage. I think that gave Dad some kind of empathy for what these orphans were going through, because he basically had been abandoned by his own biological father. I've met several babies that were on those initial flights. When I meet and hear their stories of what they're doing with their life today and the joy in their face, knowing they got to come here, have a life, have a chance, I have to tell you, it brings tears to my eyes.
My situation in Vietnam was not good. My first memory was walking down an alley and seeing people coming in with guns. I was holding someone's hand, and I was short enough that when they were shooting everybody in the alley, I didn't get killed. And then I just remember like the silence. And then all the family members coming into the alley and just screaming and crying and finding their dead relatives.
It was one of the horrifying, lasting images of the war.
My uncle was a general in Ho Chi Minh's army. There was a rumor that Ho Chi Minh had planned to kill Amerasian children after the war to kind of annihilate the US influence in Vietnam. I remember a couple times just sitting in the corner and watching my family and knowing that I was a shameful thing because I was half American. Operation Babylift was planned to try to save us.
It was a very, very difficult situation because the South Vietnamese government was in disarray, but they were still in charge. Time was running out, and in order to process an orphan to the United States, normally that would take months, but they waived all of those conditions and gave the green light to the United States to go ahead and evacuate all the babies.
I remember just inside feeling very anxious about going somewhere that I didn't know. We woke up the next day, got put into buses, and we were driven to the airport.
My mom walked me up the stairs of the first flight, and then she left the airport, and at the last minute they decided that the flight was too full, and so they took me off the flight and put me on the flight the next day.
They had a C-5A aircraft to operate this flight. A C-5A is not designed to carry babies. It's designed to carry troops and weapons.
Downstairs, the older kids and the adults had to make do on blankets stretched out on the steel floor. Cargo straps substituted for seat belts.
I was at the airport that day, and there were over 300 people on there, including babies, children, volunteer nurses, doctors, so on. I watched it take off to the east, and everything looked pretty normal. About 20 minutes later, I went outside and took a look around, and I saw this column of black smoke about a mile or two from the end of the runway. And I said, oh my God, I think that's the C-5A.
Vietnamese soldiers continued to look for victims buried overnight in parts of the plane.
Tragically, that first flight crashed, and numerous members of the crew and numerous children died in that crash.
Just a loud explosion all at once, and I looked back and saw the doors falling off like they really never was attached, and blankets and debris flying throughout the aircraft, bodies flying, tumbling, and a lot of screaming.
In response, 2 individually chartered Pan Am 747 flights operated by Pan Am crews stepped in to keep that mission going.
I started flying when I was 26, and I flew for Pan Am from 1969 to 1978.
On April 4th, I had a 2-day layover in Hong Kong. We had been out having dinner and came back to the room. We turned the TV on, and on the TV, they were showing the crash. We were absolutely petrified. there's a knock on the door. The bellboy gives us a telegram.
The telegram spelled out what we were doing, that we were evacuating over 400 orphans.
This was a war zone. They had to volunteer to go into a war zone and take the risk for their own lives to help save these orphans.
People were a little scared, and I started getting calls from my crew. They were saying, "We're not going into a war zone." We had a full crew of 15, now we were down to 9, which was really barely legal. It was a very emotional experience.
I was more excited to be part of that mission. I was holding back tears going into those buses, and the nurses had a hard time giving these children up.
I was very busy organizing. We were stocking diapers in the closets and making bottles and setting up bassinets. I didn't even have time to feel scared or even think of that.
I never worked so hard in my life. A lot of the children were sick. They had measles, hepatitis, meningitis.
And they just kept handing me babies, one after another, and I tucked them into these little bassinets.
I remember having some of the children that had survived the crash the day before. And they were all sitting together. They were very scared.
To think of, the desperation of the people in Vietnam. To be able to send your own children away and not knowing what was going to happen to them at all. That was heartbreaking, really.
After you had the tragedy of the first military plane crashing, it just heightened what was going on. When that first flight came into San Francisco, there's just this picture of my father taking one of the first babies off the plane. I think my father will be remembered fondly.
My parents could not have any children, so they adopted me. Life in America for me when I was small was pretty hard. Growing up in a community with just Caucasian and African American people, and me being the only Asian, it was tough because I was different from everyone else.
It was a huge adjustment. I was adopted into an all-white family in a very white part of Portland. I was really blessed. I have the same friends that I've had since kindergarten, and they were the ones that taught me English, pointing to things and telling me, the words.
It was hard to kind of assimilate into a culture that you were never prepared to be put into. You're constantly questioning yourself, and you're always blaming yourself if something goes wrong. I feel that my life would definitely be different if I didn't get on that flight.
The takeaway from this is the ripple effect of all these babies that grew up and now they're 50 years old or older, and the good they've done for America, gotten into careers, raised families, all those kind of things. This country was always founded on bringing people in and welcoming people. How could you not welcome these 3,000 babies that did nothing, and they got stuck in the middle of a war, and it was our job to get them out of there and give them a chance for life.
Operation Babylift was just, in my opinion, a mission that should be in every history book, that helped many people become who they are today.
We are living our American dream just like you. You just have to remember that these kids that you have supported to come over, they will make something of themselves if they are given that chance.
People sacrificed their lives for me. I joined the Army out of high school because I wanted to serve the country that saved me. My heart beats for America and the people that sacrificed to bring me here and give me the amazing, amazing life I've had.
409 of us were carried onto your plane. After this day, your life would never be the same. Changing diapers and feeding us all, holding us in your arms, many of us very small. It was hot and humid the day we arrived. We were handed to loving parents. Yes, we survived.
I'm so thankful for what your father did and the time and effort he put into that and the heart he put into that to save my life specifically, but for all of us orphans.
We're blessed to have you here and growing up in America, and it just meant so much to him. So to see something 50 years later, that's just amazing, this beautiful human being. So God bless you.
Thank you. There's no words for what Operation Babylift means to me. The only word I can use is life.
Wow. I'm sitting there next to Twee, and I am so glad, so proud that my dad had the moral compass and courage to do that. Twee, Dad would be so proud of the life you made for yourself. He would be so proud. Like, you know, I got this introduction. I worked in the TV and film business. I was sitting there thinking, I've worked on some small parts on some big movies, Black Hawk Down, Contact with Jodie Foster, Harry Met Sally with Meg Ryan. Those are great films, long shelf life. I've worked with 3 Academy Award-winning directors, and the most important film I ever did was that 13-minute film right there. That film will change people's lives and the way they think, and I'm so proud I was part of that. War is ugly, it's chaos, it's terrible. We've seen it, we know what happens, never ends well. We saw what happened in Vietnam, we saw what happened in Afghanistan, and we're seeing it now in Ukraine and Gaza. But if you kind of dig around in there and dig enough and go deep enough, you can find little nuggets of good. And that's what that movie is about, the little nuggets of good that come from making those kind of decisions to help people. And Dad always felt that we had to go back and help the people that helped us during the Vietnam War. And so that's why he fought to get those dollars and try to get Congress. It was hard. Congress didn't want to give any money. And you heard in the film that I think Dad had such great empathy for those babies because of his own childhood. He had an abusive father that was very brutal to his mother, and Dad, in some way, shape, or form, had been abandoned. He was raised by a great stepfather that invested in his life here in Grand Rapids. But it is it is love, not blood, that raises kids. You got to make a choice, and Dad felt we had an obligation to those babies. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, and I got to know her, Twee Williams. We were shooting this documentary at my ranch and my little part, and so we're shooting a scene, and all of a sudden, I'd heard the day before they had shot footage with the stewardesses and some of the orphans, maybe 4 hours north of where I lived. And there was, I heard through the grapevine, there was one of the women wanted to come down and shake my hand and thank me for what Dad did. I didn't do anything, what Dad did. And I said, yeah, sure, that sounds great. And so we're shooting the scene. I'm trying to learn, where I walk, what I say, and all that stuff. So and all of a sudden this car comes driving up my driveway and right in the middle of the scene and kind of ruins the whole scene. And that was Twee. She gets out of the car and we both just kind of look at each other, and I walk over there and just give her a big hug. And we cried and hugged, and that was the start of a relationship. My wife and I just, she's going to be number one on our Christmas card list every year now. But to hear her story and get to know her over the last 3 months, and we've stayed in contact and done interviews together, radio and TV and stuff, and it's been such fun to hear her story and how it goes deeper and deeper, and to think how God had a hand on her shoulder. She was on that first flight. Her mother was going to give her up because of the danger of her being killed when the communists overran Saigon. And her mother put her on that flight and thought she was on it and left the airport. And again, thank God, someone took her off that flight at the last minute, put her on the flight the next day, or she probably wouldn't be with us today. But this, when you dig deep enough in the ugliness of war, you get to meet little gems like this, and there's so many more. Tonight, she's a little bit of the poster child here, and we're glad that she's here. But Twee, I need you to come up here and save me. Praying for you.
Thanks for making me cry. Tonight we celebrate the 50th anniversary of what President Gerald Ford did to rescue so many Amerasian children and Vietnamese refugees from the war in Vietnam. We honor him and his life of servitude to others. His life is a shining example of what legacy is all about. I want to take a moment and talk about legacy. Legacy represents the impact or influence one leaves behind, such as values, traditions, or historically significant achievements. One of the most important things I once read was that on your tombstone, there are 2 dates, the date you were born and the date you die. But the most important thing is the dash right in the middle. Between those 2 numbers, that dash. That single dash is so small, but it represents your whole entire life. It covers every moment, all the good you did and all the bad. It encompasses all your victories and all of your defeats. In that dash is everything you did in this life that can be passed on to others. Your entire legacy is in that dash. Gerald Ford was a man that left a lasting legacy for many of us in this room. But he only left a legacy because others contributed to building up the man that he was to become. His mother Dorothy and stepfather Gerald Ford Sr. raised him and helped to mold him into a great man. His high school football coach, Clifford Gettings, taught him the value of practice and teamwork and how to be a leader on and off the field. Pop Churm, his track coach, modeled compassion, character, and leadership. His South High School principal, Arthur Krause, created a $100 scholarship just for him, which allowed him to pay for his first year of college at the University of Michigan. And Paul Goebel, who saw the potential of a young Gerald Ford and pushed him to be better. I'm sure there are many more that contributed to the life of President Ford, but as I walked into the museum yesterday and saw the huge placards that commemorated these men and women that contributed to his life, I was in awe. These are simple, everyday people who helped to create a president of the United States. A man known for his moral integrity and strength in a time when America needed it the most. It made me wonder, in some distant future, would my name, face, and impact on someone's life be up on a placard? Long after I am gone, will someone say, Twee impacted my life? Or I am the man or woman I am today because of what Twee did in my life? I sure hope so. I hope this is a dream that all of us have. I hope and pray that the goal of each and every person in this room is to impact just one life. Now, we know that President Ford impacted millions of lives around the world, but let's just say for a moment that he only impacted the Vietnamese community. Through Operation Babylift, he saved around 3,200 Amerasian children from April 4th to April 24th, 1975. Through Operation New Life, which was from the end of April through November of 1975, about 130,000 Vietnamese refugees were flown to different parts of the US. Of those, about 10,000 made their permanent home here in Grand Rapids. So let's keep things small. If we talk about legacy and how one person can impact one person more, we can add the Amerasian children of about 3,000 with the Vietnamese that made their home here, which is about 10,000, and get a total of about 13,000. If 13,000 people impacted one life, that is 13,000 more people. Now you have a total of 26,000 lives impacted. 26,000 lives impact another 26,000 lives, and now we get 52,000 lives. And 52,000 lives impacting another 52, you've got over 100,000 lives. It doesn't take very long to go from 13,000 lives impacted to 1 million lives impacted. Now, these are conservative numbers. Some of the Vietnamese and Amerasians are now doctors, teachers, coaches, engineers, moms and dads, fill in the blank. All of them impacting hundreds of lives. Exponentially, untold millions are touched by those 13,000 lives. Or if we want to go back to President Ford, millions have been touched because of Mr. and Mrs. Ford Sr., Clifford Gettings, Pop Chum, Paul Goebel, and all of their impacts on one life, President Ford. I'm so thankful for President Ford and what he did to save me specifically. I'm thankful for those that have poured into my life, my parents who took home a 5-year-old instead of a 6-month-old, my sisters Michelle and Becky who have supported me, my childhood friends who taught me English and how to play and laugh and are still some of my biggest supporters, Jack and Miriam who saw a broken young adult and took the time and effort to make her a better person, Jody who has taken me on the long path to healing and growing in my spiritual walk, and Kaisa who lets me be a real person without judgment. I would not be the person I am today without this group of people. So I leave you with these questions. Who can you think of that has impacted your life? How did they impact your life? Who would you be today without that person or persons? But even more important, who in your life have you impacted? This is the 50th anniversary of what President Ford did to save so many lives. His dash is full of legacy. I am praying that my dash will have an eternal impact. But how will you spend the next 50 years, and what will your legacy be? Thank you.
We're going to sit here for just a couple minutes, and I'm going to pepper Twee with some questions because thank you for talking about Dad. I appreciate that. But you need to learn about her. So she changed the script on me here. She confuses me here. So what what impressed me so much, and I think would impress Dad, is what so many of these orphans, these children, these babies, took the opportunity that Dad, listen, Dad launched Operation Babylift. He fought for it. But you saw from the film that there were courageous people after that, the stewardesses, the pilots, the people, the nurses that had to go into Vietnam, into a war zone, and risk their life. And as you saw, that first flight, some didn't come home. And so there's a lot of people that made this happen. And I think when I hear Twee's story, and hers is one of thousands, the people that were going to foster you were expecting a 6-month-old baby. They get a 5-year-old, right? Their church had given them clothes and things like that for a 5-year-old, and or for a 6-month-old, and you show up as a 5-year-old. What you don't know about her, you saw some of the pictures. She was a tremendous athlete in high school, soccer player. She made the United States Junior World Cup soccer team. That's how good she was. And went into the Army as a tank mechanic for 8 years. And Twee, I want to ask you, before we get on to some of the other stuff, why did you join the Army?
The simple answer is I love America. I'm very grateful for every opportunity that I've been given here. My father was a African-American Marine. At the time, I had thought he died in Vietnam, and I wanted to honor him and serve the country that I love and just give a little bit back for what I'd been given.
We didn't see it in the film, but you eventually went back to Vietnam, and your mother had thought that you died on that first flight. And share with the audience, if you're willing, what that was, how you found your mom, what that was like, and where you are today in that journey.
So there was a realtor that was interested in my story, and she did, half the year in Vietnam, half the year in the U.S. And so she asked me for my INS paperwork. She read through it, and she said, it doesn't say in here that your mom is dead. Are you sure she's dead? And I said, well, it's in Vietnamese. I can't read it. So she read through the whole thing. She said, well, there's an address on here. So when I go back to Vietnam, I'm just going to go to this address and see what I find. She went to the address, and my family lived down the street. She had taken some pictures of me, and my mom had one single picture of me. I think they showed that, and it's definitely me. And so I went back and met her, which was a very traumatic experience. But I kind of pushed through that, got some counseling, and have gone back 3 times to see her. When I first found her, she was in a tin hut with no running water or electricity, and now she's got a house, and she's got a little business selling chickens and eggs, and is doing really well. So
well, you got that house for her.
I helped.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. You're too humble here. Now, it makes me think, I heard some stories when Twee first got here, because you didn't grow up with running water and all this. Tell us how you terrorized your foster mom.
Thanks. My poor parents. So my mom tells stories about how, I was fascinated with running water, and so I would go in the bathroom and lock the door and plug up all the drains, and so flooded the bathroom more than once.
Today, Twee, and you can tell us more about coaches lacrosse, soccer for high school and college, but I'm more interested in you're doing some missionary work, and you use sports, kicking a ball, to go to refugee camps and do work with children that same type of situation? Tell us about that.
So I'm with One Challenge. My fearless leader is over here. Basically, I use soccer, track, and lacrosse to reach traumatized children in refugee camps around the world. I also work with my local high school because I believe that we should have an impact on our own community. So I'm in the middle of track season with my local high school. Thank you to my lovely assistant, Kate, who is taking care of things while I'm gone. But I love coaching, and I love using, a single ball to, you bring out a ball even in the worst of circumstances and people smile. And you don't have to know the language to bring out a soccer ball. There's no language involved. You bring out a soccer ball, you bring out smiles, you bring out a chance for children to be children for just a little while. And that's my heart is, even in the worst circumstances, bringing out a smile in a child. It breaks your heart, but when you've left there that you've made an impact.
We heard in the film that you had an uncle that was in the North. He was a general in Ho Chi Minh's army, and then you also had another uncle that worked for the U.S., helped the U.S. To so many Americans, we're thinking you've got relatives on both sides of the Civil War, and yet your uncle was worried about you. And how did that happen?
So my uncle, who was a general for Ho Chi Minh, let my uncle, who worked for the U.S. Department, know that Ho Chi Minh had planned to kill Amerasian children. And so he basically got word to him. They concocted a plan. My paperwork was forged, and I was able to leave Vietnam. So my mom walked me up the stairs on April 4th and left the airport. And then because it was full, they took me off that plane and then put me on the plane the next day. But my name is actually on a list of children that died that day. So.
And I know my own father used to talk. He lived his faith very quietly, but he talked about his faith. It was very important to him. And if you go out to his, where he's buried out there, and his acceptance speech for when he was sworn in, he talked about that. He said, you can't confirm me with your votes, but I ask you to support me with your prayers. And I know my dad, his prayer life, his faith meant a great deal to him as he was making decisions. And tell me this journey, the story of your faith. And somebody had a hand in my, God had a hand in my dad's life. It feels like God had a hand on your life to get you off that plane. What has that journey been for you?
I've had people, like I said, that have poured into my life. Jack and Miriam are very strong Christians that were missionaries to Africa, and they took me in, and I lived with them for 2 years in a very, very bad time of my life. And so because of them, I saw who God could be, and because of them, after 2 years, I became a Christian. And I had to walk the path of healing. And my friend Jody was the one that took me on that path. And it took about 5 years after meeting my mom to get to the point where I could go back to Vietnam. And Jody went with me, and we basically did what's called a prayer walk. And so we went to that alley where I saw all the people killed, and we went to my house, and we ended up at the airport, and I'm just bawling because, I could have died right there on that plane. And I'm just bawling, and I'm just kind of praying, and God gave me a vision of an angel taking my hand and leading me off that plane the first day, and taking my hand and leading me back up the stairs the next day. And he just gave, in a quiet voice, just told me, I've always been here, and I've always had a purpose for your life. And since then, I've really emphasized with people that there's a purpose for each and every one of us. And we're meant to be here.
and you're meant to be wherever God has placed you, and that you have something specific to give this world. And it's going to be amazing if you just let yourself give.
Thank you so much. We're glad that you found that purpose. Thank you very much. And now, the lights I can't see, but I want to bring Leigh up here, and she's going to be in charge and moderate our next panel. Leigh?
Good evening to our distinguished guests, members of the community. I am Leigh Chen, and I am a Vietnamese immigrant. Tonight I have the honor to introduce to you our panelists, Alice Kennedy, Duyên Bùi, Father Peter Vũ, and my former student, Sơn Chen. Please. These individuals will share their stories, and I will weave mine in with them as well. We're going to talk about how we come here, tying on with Thuy's talk. There's a purpose to why we are here in West Michigan. So let's start. Duyên, Thuy talked about Babylift, the Babylift project. And in our community, folks who have been here for more than 50 years know Reverend Dr. Howard Skipper. Yes? Yes? I'm going to rely on Duyên right now to tell us about how the Freedom Flight refugees started here in Grand Rapids, and what was the role of Dr. Reverend Skipper, and how were you involved in that organization?
Good evening. My name is Duyên Bùi, and I'm here tonight and just want to share some experience that I work at the refugee center with Reverend Skipper for 20 years until we closed the door. Talking about Freedom Flight Refugee Center, we have to say something about President Ford, because without him, there's no Freedom Flight Refugee Center. Reverend Skipper answered the call from President Ford. It's the story that happened when he come back from San Francisco to Grand Rapids, and on the plane for 4 hours long. He heard the children crying in the back of the plane, and he tried to find out that's the orphan who was delivered to the new parents in the United States. And he think of himself, he said, there's a God calling for me to do that. So he come back home and connect with friends and a couple people from the church to form the task force to help the refugee from Vietnam. And he called on the White House and talked to the people that President Ford's staff and formed the program. And he went to all of the camp to meet up with the refugee to see if they want to resettle in the in Michigan. So when he go to Fort Chaffee, instead of helping 10 families, they end up come, and your family is one too, right? They came up like more than 100 people, right?
Yeah.
So he come back and have to go to talk to more churches around to find the sponsor for them. I'm sorry, I have to look at my note.
So how did you get involved with the Freedom Flight refugee?
So in 1980, during the summertime, I got the letter from the U.S. Embassy from Thailand on the ladder, it's just a piece of paper. One side is my address and the other side my husband's name with just the NW9. It's the name of the camp, the military camp. So with that, I have a puzzle. I don't know why he's there and why he didn't write me and explain to me about the situation that he's there. But I took the letter and came to the refugee center to apply for him, believing that he's there. And that day, Robert Skipper happened to be there. And he talked to me, and knowing that I just graduated from college, he said, "Will you work for us?" And I say, I don't know anything about social work. I don't think I can fit here. But he said, "None of us here have a social work degree." But we're here if our heart feels right.
Yeah.
So I came home and I talked to my dad, and he said, "He's the saint. When he asks for help, you help him." So then I call and say, "I'll take the job." And up for 20 years, I working there. The refugee changing during the time, when we came in 1975, it's a different problem, different barrier that we have. But when the after the Babylift, yeah. So the children from the American children was treated really bad in Vietnam. So they come up with the American program to help to bring them to the United States. So we learn along and help them. And later on, the people escaped by boat. A lot of them die on the sea, so then the United States have a program, it's called a humanitarian organization program, to help bring people from the release from the re-education camp to come to the United States. So we help them mostly with employment and immigration. And I was in the employment department, so I help people who come here for jobs. And moving forward, that
is the Freedom Flight Refugee Center still in operation?
No, and in 1999, that we placed most of the refugees to work, so our caseload has become very small. Not a lot of people depend on public assistance. So then, to be able to get the funding for the next year, we don't have enough caseload. So to get that, we have to oversee all the 3 programs in Michigan. It's Detroit, Lansing, and Grand Rapids. But unfortunately, Robert Skipper was diagnosed with cancer at that time. And he doesn't think that he can do that. And he asked if we want to step up to do that. None of us have ability to do what he did. So we come to the conclusion that we have to close the door. And for 25 years that in operation, that's a really painful decision that we have to do that. Then we transfer the refugee work to the smaller agency. Later on, it belonged to Bethany Christian Services.
So talking about Bethany Christian Services, that's an organization in our town that helps to organize and make the connection between the sponsors and the family in Vietnam. So let's move on to sponsorship. Father Peter, you've been in this community for how many years? Can you give us some insight into sponsorship and how does that work?
Yeah. My name is Father Peter Vu. I'm the pastor at St. Mary Magdalene Church here in Kentwood. And I came here in 1987, 88. And by the way, I stopped by to see Thuy and say hello to her, and she got me a job. And
you didn't stay with that job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but that's when I began to discern the calling to be a priest. So I always, in case you don't know, most Asians are very religious people. We rooted in our religion, whether Catholicism or Buddhism. And we rooted in traditions and customs, families, all those things that, we talked earlier, Thuy and Steve for talk about. So I always have the calling of, being a priest. And so I make long story short, I was one of those people that left behind. My dad worked for the national security in South Saigon. So we knew when the end was near, just like Thuy said about her uncle. But my dad thought that we were able to fight back and all that. So make long story short, he was one of those people in re-education camp. I could not see him. I mean, I saw him when I was 5 years old, probably about the same age like Thuy. And I did not see him until I graduated from high school. And so I got the call to, to be a priest, but I had to sneak out. So I came here and, of course, enter a seminary and try to do that. One of the things I've learned is that, like Thuy alluded before, you try to search for the purpose of your life, especially after the traumatic experience with the Vietnam War. And so for me, I could be a doctor, lawyers, all those things. But like I said, that the Vietnamese are deeply rooted in religions and faith. So I thought maybe God is calling me to bring healing, to the people, these broken souls. And so that's when I joined to become a priest. And then, of course, like they said, the rest is history. So I've been a priest for 30-some years. And during that discernment, God asked me, and it's interesting how God works, like what Mr. Steve Ford talked about, get in contact with Thuy. Another priest was a chaplain at Grand Rapids Home of Veterans. He about to retire and said, Father Peter, why don't you be a chaplain at the Home of Veterans? And that way, you can bring some healing to these veterans. I didn't know much about that program. And so I decided, hey, what the heck, let's try out something, new. And it's interesting how God works, and it became a miracle because I helped out at the Home of Veterans for 12 years, bring healing to these veterans. They would come to me and talk about the trauma of the war, and they share with me some of the stories that they would not share with their families. So I, at that time as a young person, I was thinking about climbing the ladder, in the church. Who knows, might become the next pope, As a matter of fact, the veteran make me a Voosmobile. I still have it in my office. It's the front grill is from England, but the rest is from Ford and and GM. But it's interesting how God calls each of us to a higher vocation, a higher purpose. And so I dropped that dream. And I said, like Thuy said, I tried to figure out when someone dies, is people going to remember, how famous you're going to be, you have been, and also how much money you have in the bank account. It's how the life that you touch. And so I began to think in that way. And the lives I'm able to touch, the veterans, I heal. And of course the people that I'm able to help as a priest, as a chaplain. And my life now, if the Lord calls me home, I would say I am fulfilled. I am happy where I am. Because like Steve also alluded earlier, that we need role models. And I want to thank President Gerald for, for his characters, his courage, to do the right things. And I think that's what I myself are called to do as a priest, a leader, religious leader. Try to do the right thing, try to be the role models, for the young and for the people. I'm happy with that calling, and I continue to do that. Of course, met a lot of people that come over to this country here. They feel lost, So the churches and temples, I work well with the, Linson Temple in Belmont. I gone down there to visit them all the time, and they give me free food too. So, so I gel well with the monks and the nuns down there, and I use my language ability and my connection in Plainfield Township to help them expand and do that. So we collaborate with each other, through that. And I think if there's one thing that I thank God for is to be able to let Him use me as an instrument, to help, bring healing, whether to veterans, to these people, but more important, to be that role model. And I want to be that person, that role model. So whether you talk about coaches like Thuy talks about, or a counselor, or people at work that at the center. So those are the ones that make a difference. You bring healing to these people. You help them, direct them in the right direction. You help them find the calling, high calling. And I think that makes the world different. That makes the world go around. And I thank God, for letting me do that. So.
Okay, thank you, Father.
Yeah.
So that is your calling. Moving on to my former student, Sun Chen. He had a totally different calling, and currently Sun is living in Japan. We had to fly him in here for this event.
I'm awake now.
Yes, I text him and I call him. I said, we need another panelist. Who would it be? Sun, the perfect one. So he was born here, my former student. People don't know this. He is an amazing artist. By the way, I teach art at East Kentwood High School. I'm in my 23rd year. So I'm going to give it over to Sun. Sun, tell us about your experience living in Kentwood, the most diverse city in West Michigan. And then our high school, East Kentwood High School, is the 4th most diverse school in the nation. And so it's a privilege, yes. It's wonderful to work there. It's wonderful to teach there. And Sun's going to share his experience of going to school there. And what did you do after high school? Sun, you want to jump in?
Okay. So just to give a little bit of background on me being born and raised here. So my parents came to Grand Rapids in 1993, and I was born shortly in 1994. My parents were just children during the time of the fall of Saigon, so they weren't able to make it over here right away. And so I was able to hear a lot about what life was like growing up in Vietnam after the war. It was a very difficult time, to say the least. My dad, for example, his family was fairly wealthy, but after the fall of Saigon, they took everything from our family. And my father never got to complete his education, nor did my mother. My father had to drop out when he was in high school, and my mother had to drop out when she was in middle school, just so that they could work to barely survive. And so, and my mother was also Amerasian, so that was how they were able to come to the United States in 1993. So hearing all of this, it just made me really appreciate the opportunities that I was given here for just being born here and being raised here. So I really cherished my public education, the free education, and we weren't, we were relatively poor. I noticed right away that we didn't have a lot, but even then I still felt I felt privileged. I felt blessed compared to what my parents had to live through. So I always cherished my education. I focused on school a lot. And I was also thankful for the community that was formed here, right? Our predecessors, the Vietnamese American community, as well as the churches that basically helped clothe and feed my family when they first arrived here, because they barely had anything. There was a great support system already in place. So just like how, you know, my parents kind of suffered to give me a good life, the Vietnamese Americans who were the first ones who come here to Grand Rapids, Michigan, they worked really hard to build this community, and I'm ever thankful for that. And so, and East Kentwood was, I look back very fondly on that experience because, not just because Mrs. Tran was my art teacher and
you get an A for that.
I love Miss Tran because she was infamous. It was like, oh, Miss Tran, she's the mean teacher. It's like,
yes,
she is tough, but like for good reason. And if she's tough on you, well, that's because she likes you a little bit, at least a little bit. You know, because honestly, I was just, you know, like any other high school kid, I just want to relax, go home, play video games, you know, but no, she saw I had talent. It's like, we're going to put you in some art competitions. Like, you're staying after school, you're going to work on this. It's like, okay.
And he did. He won the top of the state.
Yes. Thanks to I was able to win some awards and, you know, win a scholarship to Interlochen Arts Camp for their art program one summer. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm very thankful for the teachers at East Kentwood, Ms. Tran especially. In fact, when I met my friend AJ over there recently, he was like, oh, can you let Ms. Tran know that, you know, I want to thank her for being so hard on me when I was in high school because I really needed it back then. So, but, and so East Kentwood was very diverse, and, you know, growing up in Grand Rapids and Kentwood, I just saw, you know, it was normal to me just seeing the diversity of Kentwood. It was like, oh, you know, this is how America is, right? And then, so I didn't learn to appreciate that until much later when I left. So as I mentioned before, I was very thankful for the life I was given here. And so like T said, you know, I really wanted to somehow, you know, give back to the community, give back to the nation. So that was why during my senior year of high school, I was so easily tricked by my friend AJ into signing up for the Army. I got him back later. And then later on, I commissioned as an officer after attending the United States Military Academy at West Point, where
He did take a gap year, and I yelled at him pretty good. Yeah. And then I kept calling him. I said, "What are you going to do with your life now?" And then he called me. He says, "I got accepted to West Point." I said, "There you go, boy."
But yeah, also when I commissioned, I made my friend AJ salute me as revenge for. But so as an officer, I was stationed in different parts of the country, and stationed abroad. And something I noticed across the Army is the Army is actually very diverse as well. Many of the soldiers that I served with were either immigrants themselves or children of immigrants. And because of my experience, because of my education, because of East Kentwood High School, the diversity that I grew up with there allowed me to really connect and communicate with soldiers of all sorts of backgrounds. Anytime that they walked into the office and, you know, were telling me about like where they're from and the food that they have, and they're inviting me like, oh, if you ever go to this place, let me know. Like I'll show you around, things like that, and or just the little struggles that we had growing up. I felt like I could connect to my soldiers, and I felt like I was able to be a better leader because of this community, this diverse community that I grew up in, because of East Kentwood High School. And so I look back really fondly on that.
The school there, in case you don't know, I was invited during a graduation. Our 1,500 graduates, they came from like 60-some countries. And so my church is right in in Kentwood. And I look out in my church, we have people from the whole America, South America, all that, and of course Asia, Filipinos, and of course even also in Africa, all that. And so we reflect, my church community reflect what Kentwood is all about, East Kentwood is about.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that we touch upon, how the Lord able to use us to be the instrument, to touch others. And that's one of the things that the church, St. Mary Magdalene, we're able to sponsor, a church in Haiti, and to help them. And then we also had a Feeding America program, and we pray that we don't run out of funding, but so that's why I started raising some chicken, and also plan the community garden, and last year alone we started the community garden, able to provide to the food pantry 500 pounds, and we want to double that this year. And so, like Thuy said, if each one of us, can be the instrument of God, to bring miracles, it's multiply.
Yes.
And so the Feeding America program, I mean, the church helped add, subsidize like, $600-700 a month, but we're able to feed over 200 families every month, and I'm proud of that. And then of course people that come from all walk of life, refugees, all that, stop by the church and ask for help. So that is another way of I find satisfied with my life and with the calling. But East Kentwood, is wonderful in that way, diversity.
So to my Vietnamese friends out there, nếu mà có ai muốn ăn tiết canh gà thì hỏi cha nha.
We also our chicken is a miracle. They lay eggs even in the winter. And we just give out the chicken, to the eggs. We'll give the chicken eggs.
So another person that has really close tie to Kentwood is Alice Kennedy. Alice was, how many years did you coach tennis?
25 years.
Oh my goodness, woo!
Yeah. I finally officially retired about 2 years ago. I coached the girls and the guys JV tennis. And again, very proud to be a part of East Kentwood, and that's how I met Lay.
Yes.
And a lot of her students would come to me and say, "Oh yeah, do you know, Mrs. Tran?" And I'm, no, I guess I don't teach there, but we became friends after so many exchanges and so on.
Yeah, tell us about how involved you are in the community, because I know Alice Kennedy is a staple in this town. You bring that name up and everybody knows who she is. So let's get to know the famous Alice Kennedy real close up.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll give you a little bit of background about me. Just like every, I guess, first generation of immigrants, right? The struggle is to maintain a balance between assimilation to the new homeland and maintaining your own culture. And then add to that, having to learn a new language can be really challenging. So I was fortunate enough as a child to have lived in Australia for 2 years. So by the time I came over to the US, I had already mastered the English language, speaking anyway. And so I believe that helped me with my transition here much easier than others. I attended Riverside Junior High. It was junior high because it went all the way up to 9th grade back then. And then after that, I went to Creston High School. And I didn't need to go to a school that had English as a second language program. And I don't know about my siblings. I had a brother that was in high school. I was in junior high, and then another sister that was in elementary school. And I'm not sure about them, but as for me, the teachers and my classmates were very welcoming, which made it really nice. And I've made lifelong friendships with some of them who are actually in the audience tonight. Our family was sponsored by Aberdeen Reformed Church. And our host family, the parents were Jean and Gloria Morrison. And the church was very helpful in finding us housing immediately. And Jean and Uncle Jean and Aunt Gloria, took my parents around and introduced them into the city and made sure that my dad got transportation, as well as helped us until with the finding our first house. So the church helped us, and then my parents were able to buy their own house. And the Morrisons made sure that we got off food stamps as soon as possible. Okay. And my parents were separated in the refugee camp. My dad was he didn't leave until, so my mom and my brother and my 2 sisters and I left Vietnam on the 24th of April. My dad and my uncle stayed to the bitter end. So they ended up at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, while our family was at Camp Pendleton in California. So when Reverend Skipper went to Fort Chaffee, my dad and my uncles were one of the first people to resettle here in Grand Rapids. Okay. And because they were multilingual, they volunteered to teach English as a second language to adults through the Bethany Christian Services. Yes, yes. And when I came over, I just tagged along because I had nothing else to do. And so I became their assistant. And not necessarily in teaching, but I hand out paper and collect papers and things like that. And one of the benefits of me volunteering was that I got to sit in on all of the adult classes. One of which made an impression on me was a class on culture and etiquette. I remember the instructor explaining that, you do need to make appointments. You can't just drop in on people here. And you can't call anyone after 9 at night and not before 10 in the morning. But she also stressed about saying, please, thank you, excuse me, and sorry. Now, sorry is a hard thing for a lot of people to say. Yeah. But that made an impression on me, right? While those, sayings are, in the Western culture, is pretty automatic to acknowledge like minor incidents and courtesies. In the Vietnamese culture, it could be looked upon as being insincere, right? So I remember coming back from living in Australia and going back to Vietnam. Every time I would be in a hurry and I would bump into someone, I would say, "Oh, xin lỗi," which is sorry. And then I would be met with a look of disdain. Because to the Vietnamese culture, you're not being sincere, right? If you're going to apologize, it has to be genuine, right? And then if you add thank you to being given a compliment, and if you accept, or say thank you, then it could be interpreted as you're not being humble. Okay? So on the one hand, if you don't say sorry, then you're rude. And if you say thank you, then you lack humbleness. So you can see the dilemma, right? I remember in 7th grade, a classmate who was very nice, she would give me compliments, and I wouldn't say thank you. So she said, "Alice, it's not nice to not acknowledge a compliment." And so she would practice with me. She says, "Okay, I'm going to give you a compliment, and then you say thank you, okay?" So she'd say, "Oh, I like your shoes." And I'd say, "Thank you." Because it wasn't quite sincere. We were practicing, right? And she goes, "Okay, let's try again. Your outfit is really nice today." And I said, "Thank you." But bless her heart, she had the patience. So every time she'd see me in the hallway, she would give me a compliment. She'd shout something out, and I would finally, go, "Thank you," and it became easier. Yeah.
Talking about a good friend. That sounds like a good friend. I have my very good friend here, Amy Cam. She was my first American friend. She lived around the corner. We moved in and she knocked on my door. Yeah. "Can she come out and play?" And so Amy's here today. We've been friends for 50 years.
That's wonderful.
So, but let's bring it back to the community part, because you're so involved with the community.
Yeah, well,
you wear multiple hats.
Well, because I started volunteering at a very young age in the refugee camp. I would volunteer to clean the mess halls after each meal. And then I also volunteered to give care packages to newcomers. And so that was kind of, it kept me busy, it kept me engaged, and it was a way for me to give back to my community at a young age. And then as an adult, I continued to volunteer for the broader public by being on committees and sitting on boards, mostly for organizations that benefited people of color. Okay. But as much as I volunteered, I was out in the community, I stayed very private with my culture. So I struggled with, I would have to say, in the public, I would try to assimilate and put aside my culture to fit in. But yet, when I was at home, I was 100% Vietnamese. Okay, so volunteering then kept me engaged in my community. And so one of the last public or position that I held was co-chair of the West Michigan Asian American Association, which Lei now is a chair for. And once I embraced, if you will, my culture, things just started rolling. One of the large projects, and I don't know how these things come to me, But one of these, the most fulfilling work and projects that I have done is elevating the Vietnamese and celebrating the Vietnamese community, right?
Okay.
So this has been maybe 20 years ago. I was called upon by the organizers of the Vietnamese Miss Michigan Ao Dai pageant. They were desperate in finding someone that could work with these 30 ladies that ranged between 16 to 21 for their stage presence and for their interviewing and for how to walk. And now, mind you, this is the blind leading the blind. I have never been in a pageant, so I really don't know how I got involved in this. Yeah. But I did, and we even snuck in a dance routine. It was so successful. It brought the whole community together. The leaders within the Vietnamese community, business owners were the judges. The organizers brought big entertainers from California, and it was standing room only, a lot of fun, a lot of satisfaction, because it was a whole community. Yes. Right. And I was so privileged to have been part of that. So. And yes, and so that then led to more volunteering work, one of which was not a volunteer work because I ended up getting paid for it, was to do a narration for the audio book for Stealing Buddha's Dinner.
Yes.
And you have heard of it.
Yes.
The author is Bích Minh Nguyen. She's from Grand Rapids. Her family is from Grand Rapids. Her dad and my dad were like best friends. And so it's a lot of fun. Why
Mình hết rồi. Mình hết rồi.
Oh. We're running out of time, so I'm going to shut up now.
So all in all, we want to share with you how we build community. We've been here 50 years. I want to encourage my fellow Vietnamese men and women here to let your voices rise. We bring so much wealth economically, educationally, socially, and let's keep sharing our voices and sharing our stories. Today you just heard their stories just at the tip of the iceberg, so to say. Later on, the panelists will be out in the lobby, so continue talking to them. And on your flyer, there is a QR code which you can find more about the panelists' biography. So thank you to these wonderful panelists in sharing their stories. At this time, I'd like to introduce Dale Robertson. He is the CEO of the Grand Rapids Public Museum. So Dale, all right. Thank you.
So thank you. My name is Dale Robertson. I do serve as president of the Grand Rapids Public Museum. And I know that when I've gone to a say, a really good performance or a concert, I always think about the review that I'm going to read in the paper the next day. And because how hard that is to be able to capture something that, that speaks to you. And now I find myself almost in that same role up here in following a series of speakers in a movie, and how do you capture all that and respond to something that really moves both your heart and your mind, and so I really can't conjure up words enough to express all of that, what I'm feeling tonight. It's going to take a while to process it, And so all I can say genuinely and humbly is thank you. Thank you to all the panelists and for all the words and for the time that you're sharing with us tonight. So why am I here? I'm here is really because this has been a partnership. This event has been a partnership between the Grand Rapids Public Museum and the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Museum and the Gerald R. Ford Foundation. And so we're right across the street, and we do collaborate, we do things together, and this is an example of one of those. So, but it's really a kind of part of a two-part celebration, commemoration here that's occurred. We were happy as the public museum. We have these skilled colleagues that put in a lot of time and effort, and so there are display panels out in the lobby, and so we were the ones that created, my colleagues, content and put all of those together, and so I hope you'll take a minute to look at those. But I want to talk about there's another part out there that has a bunch of photos of high school students, East Kentwood high school students, and some words, and that was another part of it. Yeah, we put that together, but it was we had a program a couple nights ago, Wednesday night, and it's part of a series called GR Stories. And so let me make a little bit of a connection in how it fits. So the Grand Rapids Public Museum is arguably the oldest museum in the state of Michigan. It is also the second largest museum in the state of Michigan. But a unique thing about it, of the 250,000 artifacts and specimens, 98% donated by the people of West Michigan over 170 years. And so with all of those artifacts and specimens, what we always say, what it always comes down to, it's the story. Each has a story. And I believe, I'm a lawyer, so I'm going to argue until the judge or jury, otherwise, that while we look at data, we look at facts, and we may think that's how we make decisions, we don't. It's the narrative. It's the story. It's that connection between the heart and the minds that we heard tonight. That's how we make those decisions for our life. So GR Stories was something really born of a conversation with my very good friend and longtime collaborator, Dr. Tony Baker. And Tony is a professor of sociology at Ferris State University. He is a board member and chair of the board of Grand Rapids Public Schools, where he co-founded the Grand Rapids Public Museum School. He's also a former Kent County commissioner, and really GR Stories and a lot of the work tonight on behalf of the museum was really as a result of Tony, so I want to recognize and thank Tony for that. So the panel a couple nights ago was high school students. It was high school students that then had to interview their parents and their grandparents and then tell that story of being in America and giving that story of their parents through their lenses of growing up here in the United States. And I will tell you, I'm at a certain age, as you can tell, all right? But you know what? If you're my age, and if you're worried about the next generation, don't. These kids were phenomenal. Their words were phenomenal in their writings, and the panelists that shared were phenomenal. We're in good shape, ladies and gentlemen. We are really in good shape. So, thank you for being here. Thank you for partnering. Thank you for the opportunity to commemorate this. And so the last thing I like to say then, because we're going to move on to more of the programs, but if you have a thing here and it says 15-minute intermission, this is that old admonition: don't believe everything you read. We're going to try to reset the stage and get things as quick as we can to move on for the best of the program and shrink it down to less than 50 minutes. So if you can remain, good. If you need to take a fine. But once again, thank you for being here and the opportunity to collaborate and be part of this commemoration.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, could you take a seat, please? All right. Thank you. We're going to get the show on the road. Thank you. Where's Margaret and Carol? All right. For this portion of the program, we have something very special for you. I've lassoed up some of our local celebrities and singers here. The first act is going to be presented by Lương Chí Cường, or Cường Lương, and he is going to sing bài gì em? The Spirit of Vietnam, the first song. And this guy doesn't need a microphone at all. So after his song, the three singers, Ánh Trần, Khoa Mai, and Thu Hương Nguyễn, they're going to sing the songs from three regions. If you need to know something about Vietnamese geography, we are divided into, well, no longer divided, right? North, Central, and South. So they will be singing songs that represent those three regions. And then the singers, the dancers from East Kentwood High School, my 10 beautiful girls here, are going to come up and sing Tình Bắc Duyên Nam, phải không? Cái gì? Tình Bắc Duyên Nam. Quên mất lời, quên mất cái title rồi. So the love of the North and the love of the South. And then after that, Cường is going to present the very last song, Dòng máu lạc hồng. Okay, the blood of the spirit of Vietnam runs red. So without any further ado, Cường Lương, could you come to the stage?
ngàn năm lưu danh sử sách. Mẹ âu cơ bố lạc lòng quân, hùng tráng con sẽ cơ đồ. Thời can qua kiên dũng đời ông cha, rừng xây gấm gương nhường vỡ. Thành Thăng Long mãi còn bay xa, đời gian qua ôm cõi hồn. Tình uy trần thế ơi, nguyện xin khắc ghi đời đời. Xưa máu dòng Biên ơi, còn đây kiên trung. Ngàn năm mãi luôn lưu truyền, hào khí Việt Nam ta ngàn đời sắc son Việt Nam. Áo hồng màu thắm ngọn cờ đào, thế giặc cuồng điện không ngủng đâu. Ngàn sau còn mãi tự cao sướng, đồn không đông điên dòng anh hào. Chiều Tây Sơn áo bạc vai, rừng thiêng sắt son thề ước. Thành Thăng Long mãi còn bay xa, thời gian qua thăm oai hùng. Nhà Nam ta đất với trời bao la, tuyệt nhiên thiên thư còn đó. Giặc bao phen khiếp với chuồn tâm gan, đất nước bất thường một dải gấm hoa. Sông hát buồn thiêng ơi, ngàn năm cho con ghi lòng. Sông lớn mình cần giang nghĩa, hồi thầy quân gói sông. Lớp lớp người chung tay đừng xây gấm son giang hà, cho nước Việt Nam ta ngàn đời khắc ghi hùng anh. Dương máu dòng tiên ơi, hôm nay cháu con ghi lòng, cho nước Hồng Tiên ta ngàn đời sắt son Việt Nam. Thương lý trên đê ơi, ngàn năm sắt son ghi lòng. Hào khí Việt Nam ta rạng ngời sắt son Việt Nam. Hào khí Việt Nam ta ngàn đời sắt son Việt Nam. Thank you.
Tôi yêu tiếng nước tôi từ khi mới ra đời người ơi. Mẹ hình du những câu xa vời, ơi tiếng ru muôn đời. Tiếng nước tôi 4.000 năm dòng dã buồn vui, khóc cười theo mạch nước nổi trôi. Nước ơi, tiếng nước tôi, tiếng mẹ ru từ lúc nằm nôi, thoát ngàn năm thành tiếng lòng tôi. Nước ơi, tôi yêu tiếng ngang trời, những câu hò dần hơn xa xôi, nhớ nhung vào mảnh tình xa xôi, biết tin vào mộng đẹp ngày mai. Một yêu câu hát chuyên kiều lặng lẽ như tiếng sao diều diều lang thang, và yêu cô gái bên nhà miệng xinh ăn nói mặn mà có duyên. sương nắng bên bờ ruộng sâu, vài ngàn năm đứng trên đất nghèo, mình đồng xa sắt không phai màu. Tấm màu nâu, những mẹ quê chỉ biết cần lao, những chèo quê bạn với đàn trâu. Áo ơi, tấm áo nâu, duyên mình đi từ cõi rừng sâu, dắt dìu nhau vào tới Cà Mau. Áo ơi, tôi yêu biết bao người Lý Lê Trần và còn ai nữa, những anh hùng của thời xa xưa, những anh hùng của một ngày mai.
Trung vọng tiếng em xin em bé tên là Hương Giang. Đêm đêm khua ẩn trắng vàng mà phiên đông ba buồn quá cửa chờ, bên vẫn lâu thuyền võ đơm sâu. Ơi hò, ơi hò, quê hương em nghèo lòng ai ơi. Mùa đông thiếu áo, hè về thiếu ăn. Trời rằng trời hằn cơn lụt mỗi năm. Ơi khiến đau thương thấm tràn, ngập thuận an để lan biển khơi. Ơi hò, ơi hò, hò ơi, ai là qua là thôn vắng, nghe sầu như chiều mưa nắng, cùng em xót dần nhiều tranh chiếu mặt. Hò ơi, bao giờ máu xuân hết tuôn tràn, quê miền Trung tôi tiếp yêu cạn, cho em vang khúc ca nồng nàn. Ngày vui tam đau vinh mẹ bồng con sơ sinh,
chiều đầu xóm xôn xao đón người chương trình, ngập mùi hân hoan tiếng cười đoàn viên. Họ ơi, ai là qua thôn vắng nghe sâu như chiều mưa nặng, cùng em xót dần liều răn chiếu mặn. Họ ơi, bao dương máu xin hết tuôn tràn, quê miền Trung thôi tiếp điêu tàn, cho em vang khúc ca nồng nàn. Vượt tan cao vin mẹ chồng có sơ xin, chiều đầu xóm xôn xao đón người chương trình, ngập mùi hân hoan tiếng cười đoàn viên.
Sức vui tươi đó chân nhau đến nơi này. Sài Gòn đẹp lắm, Sài Gòn ơi, Sài Gòn ơi. Người xe như nước trên đường vắng qua, từ xa thấp thoáng muôn tà áo tung bay. Nước sông vui tươi nối chân nhau đến nơi này. Sài Gòn đẹp lắm, Sài Gòn ơi, Sài Gòn ơi. La 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 la, la 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 la. Tiếng cười cùng gió chan hòa niềm vui say sưa. La 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 la, la 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 la. Ôi trời đẹp quá cho tôi ý thơ. Một tình yêu đến khi lời hát câu ca, để tình yêu mến bao ngày tháng năm qua. Sống mãi trong tôi bóng hôm nay sẽ không quên. Sài Gòn đẹp lắm, Sài Gòn ơi, Sài Gòn ơi. Dừng chân trên đêm khi chiều nắng chưa phai, từ xa thấp thoáng muôn tà áo tung bay. Nước sông vui tươi nối chân nhau đến nơi này. Sài Gòn đẹp lắm, Sài Gòn ơi, Sài Gòn ơi. Người xe như nước trên đường vẫn qua màu, người ra thấp hỏi câu chào nói xôn xao. Phố xa tên tan đón chân tôi đến nơi này. Sài Gòn đẹp lắm, Sài Gòn ơi, Sài Gòn ơi. La 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 la, la 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 la. Tiếng cười cùng gió chan hòa niềm vui say sưa. La 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 la, la 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 la. Ôi đời đẹp quá cho tôi ý thơ. Một tình yêu đến khi lời hát câu ca, để tình thương mến bao ngày tháng năm qua. Sống mãi trong tôi bóng hôm nay sẽ không phai. Sài Gòn đẹp lắm, Sài Gòn ơi, Sài Gòn ơi. Sài Gòn đẹp lắm, Sài Gòn ơi, Sài Gòn ơi. Sài Gòn đẹp lắm, Sài Gòn ơi, Sài Gòn ơi. Thank you so much. từ phương Bắc đã qua dòng sông sông dài, tìm đến phương này một nhà thân ai. Ơi tình Bắc duyên Nam là duyên, tình chung muôn đời ta đắp xây. Gặp nàng, nàng là thôn nữ, mắt duyên cười say môi hồng, tình ngát đôi lòng, bóng vàng chung bóng. Ơi mạnh đất dân hương là hương, cần tao chung đời vai dắt vai. Góp bàn tay thương yêu nhau rồi, ngô khoai hai mùa ngát một niềm vui, chung vui cho thương hương đời lúa vàng tình ơi. Ngày mai hạnh phúc nơi nơi gieo cười, quê hương thôi đầu dẫu đã sông núi cách chia, ta đem yêu thương về cho phương Bắc. Tìm về mảnh vườn hoa thắm, hái bông tầm xuân trao nàng, lời hát ân tình hồng hồng đôi má. Ơi đời sống yên vui là vui, dìu nhau đi vào chung bóng mơ. Góp bàn tay thương yêu nhau rồi, ngô khói hai mùa ngát một niềm vui, chung vui cho thơm hương đời lúa vàng tình ơi. Ngày mai hạnh phúc nơi nơi gieo cười, quê hương thôi đau dẫu Nam sông núi cách chia, ta đem yêu thương về cho phương Bắc. Tìm về mảnh vườn hoa trăm, hái bông tầm xuân trao nàng, lời hát ân tình hồng hồng đôi má. Ơi đời sống yên vui là vui, dìu nhau đi vào chung bóng mơ. Ơi đời sống yên vui là vui, dìu nhau đi vào chung bóng mơ. Ơi đời sống yên vui là vui, dìu nhau đi vào chung bóng mơ.
dòng máu lạc hồng 4.000 năm, dòng máu đỏ tươi chảy trong tim mình, đồi dòng lạc hồng, giống dòng tiên nguyện ôm bao đời đất mẹ. Nhịp chung hồng mãi còn vang, bao lớp người đi ra nơi biển thủy, hình bóng mẹ già đứng đợi con lạc vào xứ xanh hầu hùng. Việt Nam ơi yêu mến ngàn đời, yêu lấy che xanh có con sông chảy quay. Nào ta hát khúc hát lạc hồng, làm muôn cánh chim bay ra biển đông. Việt Nam ơi hãy nắm chặt tay, tiến bước đi lên, viết thêm trang sử vàng. Nào ta hát khúc hát Việt Nam, con cháu dòng tiên, con cháu lạc hồng, tự hào hai tiếng Việt Nam. Dòng máu lạc hồng 4.000 năm, dòng máu đỏ tươi chảy trong tim mình, đồi dòng lạc hồng, giống dòng tiên nguyện ôm bao đời đất mẹ. Nhịp chung hầu hùng mãi còn vang, bao lớp người đi hình bóng mẹ già đứng đợi con lạc vào xứ xanh hầu hùng. Việt Nam ơi yêu mến ngàn đời, yêu lấy che xanh có con sông chảy quay. Muôn cánh chim bay ra biển đông. Việt Nam ơi hãy nắm chặt tay, tiến bước đi lên, viết thêm trang sử vang. Nào ta hát khúc hát Việt Nam, con cháu dòng tiên, con cháu lạc hồng, tự hào hai tiếng Việt Nam. Thank you.
Well, what an incredible evening this has been. And I can't help but feel that President Ford would be so proud and so pleased to see what happened in this museum tonight bearing his name, and frankly vindicated, knowing that he was right in the courageous stand that he took 50 years ago. So I have a number of people I want to thank. I'd like to thank Steve Ford for his support of the work we're doing here at the foundation, for coming here and participating in this event, and being a great supporter of the educational efforts we're making here at the foundation. So thank you, Steve. I'd like to thank Brooke Clement and her team at the museum for being such wonderful partners and for giving us such a great venue to hold events such as this. So thank you, Brooke and your team. Latron has worked with us very carefully on planning this event, and we're grateful for all the work that you have done. For those of us who are not part of the Vietnamese community, I think it's a testimony to what this country aspires to be, and that is an audacious effort to create a multicultural, multiracial democracy. Not an easy thing to do. But the creed that all people are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I think was very much on display tonight. So thank you to you and your community for all you do for West Michigan. Twee Williams, thank you so much for telling us your story and for sharing with us, and for that wonderful video that we saw earlier. You're welcome back to West Michigan anytime. Thank you so much for being here. Dale Robertson and the Grand Rapids Public Museum. Dale mentioned that we have been partnering with them on this event for quite a while, and I think it's been a wonderful partnership and a real tribute to the work they're doing at the museum, and just what a great asset it is to this community here in West Michigan. So thank you, Dale, and your team. Dale mentioned Tony Baker already. I can tell you for however long we've been meeting, talking about this event and planning this event, Tony is one of these persons who's been stirring and shaking behind the scenes, and so thank you, Tony, for all the work that you have done. And I would be extremely remiss if I didn't offer one last very sincere thank you. The staff at the foundation has worked very hard on this event. They've given of themselves, they've given of their time, they put a lot of effort into it. And I have to give a special thank you to Regan Zomer, who has put in countless hours and made this whole thing go absolutely seamlessly. So thank you to the foundation staff, and thank you, Regan, especially. She's a rock star, and you can't have her. Thank you, everyone. Did you want? And Leigh would like to say something yet. So drive carefully.
Thank you, Jeff. I'd like to take a minute to thank my fellow Vietnamese audience here. Cảm ơn quý khách đã bỏ thời gian tới đây để tham dự văn nghệ tưởng niệm 50 năm chúng ta mất nước. Xin quý vị tiếp tục nói chuyện với panelists, chị Duyên, cha Peter Vũ, and Sơn Trần and Alice Kennedy. So safe trip home. Thank you very much.